They fired him for his hair and thought he'd leave in shame. Marcus Johnson doesn't cry, not in public, not even as the security guards take his badge, not when they escort him through the grand revolving doors of the Milford Grand Hotel where he's worked for 10 years, and certainly not when he hears the low buzz of whispers from across the marble lobby. Is that him? I heard he yelled at a guest. He must have done something, but he didn't. He knows he didn't. There was no yelling. There was no mistake. There were only 10 years of showing up early, overqualified, underappreciated. And now, no warning. Just an HR email, a smirk from his new manager, and a walk of shame that wasn't his to own. He steps outside into the cold morning air, holding a cardboard box of his belongings like some sad movie cliché. But his spine stays straight, his eyes locked forward. Let them stare. Let them whisper. This isn't the end. Not even close. He isn't the man they think they just fired. They have no idea who he really is. But they're about to find out. What would you do if you were fired after 10 years with no warning? He disappears into the streetlight glow, but the silence he leaves behind terrifies them more than any scream ever could. They don't know he recorded everything. Before it all crumbled, Marcus Johnson was the gold standard. He didn't just work at Milford Grand. He was the reason people came back. His name appeared in more guest feedback forms than any other staff member. Marcus was incredible. Marcus made me feel safe. Marcus should run this place. He remembered anniversaries, allergies, nicknames, and moods. His desk was his throne and his uniform his armor. He wore it crisp, polished, just like the smile he gave everyone, no matter how hard the day. He had survived 3 GMs, 2 company mergers, and a software overhaul that left half the staff panicking. He'd trained 5 rounds of new hires, stepped into weekend shifts without complaint, and was the first person called when celebrities checked in unexpectedly. His reputation was earned, not gifted. But when Catherine arrived, everything began to sour. She didn't see him, not really. Her eyes scanned the room like a threat assessment system, and when they landed on Marcus, they paused too long, not in admiration, just in calculation. She extended her hand to every female staffer, but to him, a stiff nod. Her first words weren't a greeting. "You're Marcus?" "Yes, ma'am." She tilted her head. "We allow hair like that here?" He didn't flinch. "Our policy permits natural hairstyles, ma'am. Crown, act compliant." She scribbled something into a notebook and moved on. He'd seen that look before, that mix of superiority and discomfort. It wasn't about rules, it was about image. From that day, shifts he'd held for years were reassigned without warning. His favored morning slot, the one prized by every front desk agent, was suddenly rotated to nights. Training requests bypassed him. Guests who asked for him by name were redirected, and the weekly performance huddles now ended with Catherine's classic closer. "Some of us need to align with the Milford brand. Visual." He said nothing. Not yet. Because the hotel didn't just teach him to serve. It taught him to watch. To wait. He kept a small journal now. Shift changes, comments, interactions. Not because he was bitter, because he was smart. Marcus understood systems, and he could already see the cracks forming. She's trying to erase him before anyone notices. The meeting invite arrives without context. Subject: performance review, attendance required. No name, no reason, just an ominous 3:15 p.m. appointment dropped into his calendar between 2 shifts. Marcus walks into the room precisely on time, not a minute early or late. He knows better than to give them that ammunition. Inside, the air feels still. Catherine leans against the credenza with her arms crossed, expression unreadable. Next to her, a young HR representative, Sam, no more than 26, shuffles through a thin manila folder with visible discomfort. "Thanks for coming," Sam says quickly without eye contact. We, wanted to touch base about a few concerns. Marcus lowers himself into the seat with practiced calm. I wasn't aware there were concerns. There've been murmurs, Sam continues, flipping a page. A few reports from staff. Vague, more like misalignment, tone, maybe guest discomfort. Marcus's fingers remain folded in his lap. I'd like to know which staff members, which guests, or perhaps the specific dates these concerns were documented, Catherine cuts in. Look, this isn't a courtroom. We're simply flagging patterns. Patterns without evidence are called assumptions, Marcus replies evenly. And assumptions without basis are dangerous, especially when they affect my employment. Sam coughs nervously. This isn't disciplinary, but it feels disciplinary, Marcus finishes for him, voice gentle but firm. Especially when I've never received a warning in 10 years. Catherine steps forward. Perception, Mr. Johnson, is reality in hospitality. It's not just about doing the job. It's about fitting the culture. He smiles thinly. Would you say my record doesn't fit your idea of culture, ma'am? Or is it my presence? There's a beat of silence. Sam looks down. Catherine stands, brushing off invisible dust from her blazer. Let's call this a pulse check. No decisions, just awareness. Marcus stands as well. Good. I'm very aware. Please forward any notes in writing for my personal records. His eyes meet Catherine's one last time. Calm, sharp. A warning beneath the surface. As he walks out, he feels the burn of injustice in his chest. But he won't let it show. Not yet. She's not flagging concerns. She's building a trap. It's a crisp Tuesday morning when the knife finally drops. Marcus arrives early, as usual. 6:45 a.m. EM. The air outside is still tinted blue with night. He greets the barista downstairs with a nod, bypasses the elevator's mirrored wall without glancing, and steps into the lobby where the day's shift notes await. Everything looks normal. Until it doesn't. At exactly 7:12 AYM, he sees Catherine emerge from the back office. She doesn't approach immediately. Instead, she walks the perimeter of the front desk like a supervisor, checking for cracks in drywall. Then, without a word, she gestures subtly. 2 uniformed security officers appear at the side entrance, one female, one male, both hesitant, both clearly uncomfortable. The female speaks first, low and uncertain. Mr. Johnson, we need you to come with us. Marcus straightens, confused but composed. Is something wrong? The male officer exchanges a look with the manager before stepping closer. We've been instructed to escort you off the premises. Your employment has been terminated. His heart drops, but his face stays composed. Terminated, he repeats. Based on what grounds? Catherine finally steps forward, arms behind her back like a military commander. Internal decisions. You'll receive documentation by email. You're not to interact with staff or guests further. The guests, however, are already watching. A middle-aged couple standing by the concierge whispers. A young woman, the same guest Marcus helped secure a last-minute flight just 2 nights ago, approaches. What's going on? You're not leaving? Marcus doesn't answer. He doesn't trust his voice. Instead, he looks directly at Catherine. In front of customers, he asks. You're really doing this now? You are making a scene, she hisses under her breath. He turns to security. I'll walk myself out. No need for the dramatics. He collects his things, his water bottle, a leather-bound notepad, a framed photo of his nephew. He places each item into a hotel gift bag someone left behind under the desk. Then he lifts his chin, smooths his blazer, and walks toward the lobby exit. Slow, deliberate. Every heel strike on the marble floor echoing like a drumbeat. Click, click, click. Someone's phone records quietly by the side. He lets it. He wants them to remember this. As he exits the revolving door, cold wind cuts his cheeks. But his fingers tremble for another reason. Not fear, not defeat. He pulls out his phone and snaps a photo of his badge discarded on the ground like trash. Sends it to his encrypted inbox with the caption, "She finally pulled the trigger." A message appears on his screen. From an old guest, now friend. Saw the video. What the hell? Need me to call someone? He exhales. His breath fogs in front of him. Not yet, he whispers to no one. He walks toward the parking lot, each step a countdown. They tried to shame him publicly, but they gave him the stage. He doesn't rage. He doesn't post. He doesn't tweet a thing. While people refresh their timelines expecting fireworks, Marcus disappears into silence. But it's not surrender. It's calculation. He checks into a hotel under a different name. His cousin's. A modest place on the edge of downtown, away from Milford's corporate surveillance. No one knows where he is. No one needs to. That's the point. Inside his room, he unpacks his real briefcase. Not the gift bag with his photo and notepad, but a brushed metal case he's kept locked for 3 years. Inside, 1 secure hard drive, 2 spiral-bound notebooks filled with handwriting and timestamps, and a prepaid black phone. He doesn't turn on the TV. Doesn't open social media. Instead, he stands by the window, staring down at the empty sidewalk like a chess player, reading future moves in invisible ink. Every detail since that first temperature check meeting replays in his mind, not because he's reliving trauma, but because he's indexing it, organizing it, building the sequence of what comes next. He takes a breath, presses 1 number. It rings twice. A man answers. His voice is low, calm, direct. "Is it time?" "Yes," Marcus says. "She fired me this morning. No notice. Just like we expected." There's a pause. "You want to go through with it?" "I'm done asking for decency. We move now." He doesn't have to explain. The man on the other end, Victor, is more than a friend. He's part of a quiet alliance. Former HR executive turned whistleblower. A man who had seen too much and decided one day to stop protecting broken systems. Marcus trusted him with everything. "We've got the log files ready," Victor says. "You still have the audio index?" "All of it. Categorized, cross-referenced. I even included the misdated shift revision she tried to bury." "Good men," Victor whispers. "God, they picked the wrong person." Marcus allows himself a moment of satisfaction before sitting down at the small desk. He opens his laptop. 3 emails are drafted. He reads each one carefully. The first goes to Kevin Wells, Regional Compliance Director. Subject line, "Internal Pattern of Discriminatory Practice, Milford Grand." Attached, a detailed PDF, shift history, surveillance stills, audio clips. He knows this isn't just about him. Kevin's team has been collecting flags for months. Marcus's is the final piece. The second is for Diana Elston, civil rights attorney. They met once at a hotel management seminar. She told him to call if he ever saw the ugly side. He pastes in the body, "You told me to reach out if I was ever made an example. Today is that day." He adds a folder titled Redacted Witnesses for context. It contains testimonies from 2 former employees who'd left quietly, both men of color, both discarded the same way. The third email goes to a protected inbox, a secure repository he created for himself months ago titled Just in Case. He uploads the master files, dates, times, names, voicemails, conversations in elevators, conference calls, side comments whispered in the staff kitchen. All cataloged. He hits send. 1, 2, 3, then he leans back, exhales slowly, and closes the laptop. Outside, the city moves on, unaware that a reckoning has just been triggered in room 607. He doesn't cry. He smiles. Because for the first time in months, he's holding the pen. What would you do if you were fired after 10 years with no warning? He wraps his fingers around the edge of the desk, grounding himself. Calm, silent, but brimming. He hasn't disappeared. He's preparing to strike. 3 days after his termination, the silence breaks. Not by his voice, but by his fingerprints scattered through every inbox they thought he'd lost access to. At exactly 8:07 a.m. on a Thursday, a low-perimeter email arrives in the inbox of Tony Ellis, assistant front desk manager. The subject line reads plainly, RE, request for schedule archive. Follow-up. But the moment he opens it, his stomach tightens. No message, just an attachment. A zip file labeled Milford Shift Reallocations 90 Days. Inside, spreadsheets showing call logs, modified rotas, shift reassignments labeled in color, red for male staff, of color, green for others. Highlighted names, irregular patterns. A note at the bottom of each sheet, correlated against performance reviews. Tony's hands tremble slightly. He recognizes the format, the organization, the bolding system in cell margins. It's Marcus's. He doesn't reply. He doesn't ask how. He just forwards it straight to Michelle Chen, Regional HR Audit. Michelle doesn't answer immediately, but she opens it, views all 5 attachments, and bookmarks the email. By 10:21 a.m. the GM's office phone rings. This is Helen Fields from the Global Travel Consortium, the voice says sharply. We're checking into the Milford Grand this weekend. Can you confirm if Marcus Johnson is still employed? I'm afraid he's no longer with us, Catherine replies coolly. There's a long silence. Then, flatly, send me your director's contact. We may be canceling our contract. His absence changes things. 2 hours later, another email pings into internal comms. It's from Julian Greer, a retired concierge from Milford. Long gone from the company, but still respected. He writes, saw what happened to Marcus. If you think the staff won't talk, you're wrong. You're on notice. Catherine reads it twice before deleting it. At 2:03 p.m., the third tremor lands. A printed copy of Marcus's termination notice, signed, dated, but unsigned by any witness, is taped to the break room bulletin board. No one knows how it got there, but everyone reads it, and for the first time in years, the lounge is dead silent. At 5:26 p.m., Catherine fires off a 5-word email to the tech team. With email access. Marcus Johnson. But it's too late. He's already opened the floodgates. He hasn't spoken a word, but the walls are listening. By the end of the week, silence turns to fire. Not through shouting, not through press conferences, but through inboxes, one email at a time. At 8:14 a.m. Monday morning, a message lands in the inbox of the Regional Vice President of Operations. The subject line is neutral, almost boring. Milford internal irregularities. Attention required. But inside, it is anything but. There are no pleasantries, no greetings, just raw content. Screenshots, audio clips, spreadsheets. One folder contains transcripts of meetings where Catherine refers to Marcus as too visible, claiming he commands too much guest loyalty for a desk agent. Another image captures her circling his name in red ink with a smirk, saying, he wants to be special? Fine, let's isolate him until he resigns. By 9:30 a.m., the email has quietly made its way through legal, HR compliance, and the executive ethics desk. At first, no one speaks about it aloud, but the silence becomes a hum, and the hum becomes tremor. By mid-morning, someone, no one knows whose, sends the contents of the email to a staff group thread. The reactions are immediate and unfiltered. So it's true. This is why he got pushed to nights. I remember when he took my weekend shift so I could go to my son's recital and got penalized for it the next week. And then the guests begin speaking. At 1:04 p.m., a review is posted to the internal customer feedback board by a longtime guest. I asked where Marcus was. The clerk said he no longer worked there. I canceled my booking. I don't stay in buildings. I stay with people who remember my name. That review circulates within hours, sent upward through marketing, then corporate relations, then corporate crisis teams. At 2:37 p.m., a director replies to the thread with one word. Verified? The answer comes back, yes, all of it. Meanwhile, Catherine begins to panic. Not overtly, but in the way power does when it feels gravity tilt. She holds a closed-door meeting with senior managers, accuses someone of leaking internal files, warns of legal consequences for disloyalty, and ends the meeting with a cold command. Scrub every email, anything with his name, anything with timestamps. But it's already too late. Marcus's name has become a key word in every conversation, and worse. His silence makes it impossible to spin. He hasn't posted online, hasn't given an interview, hasn't said a single word. But his voice echoes through the building like a ghost. People forward his emails without speaking. They share files in silence. They nod in passing like soldiers exchanging maps before a battle. What they once ignored, they now protect. Do you think one email can silence an entire company? Because he never needed to scream, he made the truth scream for him. She thought she buried him, but he became the ground beneath her feet. By Thursday, the movement has a heartbeat, not a protest, not yet, but something deeper, more insidious to the powerful. Solidarity. It starts quietly, with an email from a former housekeeping supervisor named Louis Whitaker. He retired 2 years ago, no longer on payroll, no longer bound by the fear that keeps most staff quiet. He sends a message addressed to all staff, Milford Grand, with the subject line, "I was told to stay silent. I won't anymore." The body of the message is short but lethal. They pushed him out the same way they pushed me. Same words. Same silence. If anyone needs a witness, I am one. If you're scared, don't be. They only win when we pretend we don't see it. No one responds publicly. But by noon, 3 more messages trickle in from former employees. Then 2 current ones. Then 5. One writes, "Marcus taught me how to de-escalate a racist customer. They wrote him up for being too direct." Another shares a screenshot of his own anonymous complaint, filed 6 months ago, marked unsubstantiated despite corroborating statements. Now those statements are in Marcus's files. Truth, once discarded, returns with teeth. Outside the walls of Milford, the story starts to grow legs. A post appears on LinkedIn. Ever been fired without warning after a decade of excellence? Ever had your work erased overnight because you were too good, too black, or too visible? Marcus Johnson, I see you. The post gains thousands of shares within 24 hours. Former guests, partners, vendors all begin to chime in with variations of the same message. We knew he was the reason the Milford Grand still felt human. Inside the hotel, managers begin whispering in hallways. One assistant general manager steps down for personal reasons. A shift supervisor calls in sick and never returns. Catherine's calendar is blocked out for executive escalations. But still, Marcus says nothing. He lets the evidence walk. And behind it, the voices gather like storm clouds. Even guests take notice. One longtime customer, a man named Bradley, who used to request Marcus for every visit, writes a public letter to corporate. "When I lost my wife, Marcus left flowers in my room and arranged a grief counselor without me asking. You don't fire people like that. You promote them. Unless, of course, it was never about performance at all." The hashtag Justice for Marcus appears late that night. Quietly, then suddenly. It spreads across platforms like a signal flare. With every share, more people come forward. It becomes a map of buried injustice, now rising from the floorboards. And Marcus? He watches from his hotel room, wrapped in silence like armor. His phone buzzes again. Another message from someone who used to work beside him. Just one line, "Say the word and I'll testify." But he doesn't say a word, not yet. He's not leading the charge, they are. The summons arrives not with force, but with formality. An invitation embossed with the Milford Grand corporate seal, requesting Marcus Johnson's presence at a regional ethics review panel. No apology. No context. Just a date, a time, and a location. Milford's regional headquarters downtown. He reads it twice before placing it back on the table. It's time. He dresses with care. Navy suit, soft pressed. White shirt, no frills. Hair styled with pride. No one to filter for. No image to soften. He looks like who he is. A man who has already won, now coming to collect. As he steps out of the hotel lobby, a black sedan is waiting. The driver doesn't ask his name. "Mr. Johnson," she greets, opening the door. "We've been expecting you." Inside the glass-paneled boardroom, 12 people sit in rows. Legal, ethics, HR, marketing. The room is cold, polished, corporate. But it crackles with tension the moment Marcus enters. Some shift in their seats. Others pretend to shuffle papers. Catherine is already there, flanked by 2 lawyers. She doesn't look at him. At the head of the table sits Victor Ellis, Regional Director of Compliance. Victor rises. "Mr. Johnson," he says evenly. "Thank you for joining us. Today's meeting concerns internal allegations of discrimination, policy manipulation, and unethical behavior regarding your recent termination. I assume you've reviewed the documentation?" Marcus asks, his voice calm but pointed. Victor nods. "We have. In detail." Marcus doesn't sit yet. Instead, he steps to the front of the room and places a sealed envelope on the table. "This," he says, "is a notarized statement from a former HR associate who witnessed Ms. Catherine instruct her to retroactively alter my file." Catherine stiffens. One of her lawyers places a hand on her arm, cautioning silence. Marcus continues, "You'll also find recordings, yes, legally obtained, of conversations in which Ms. Catherine refers to me as a liability and a problem with optics. I have transcribed and time-stamped each one." Someone in marketing exhales audibly. He places a second folder down. "And this is a timeline of every shift change, written reprimand, and off-record meeting that took place over a 10-month period, all showing clear patterns of targeting." Victor signals to an assistant who takes the documents for immediate scanning. He looks up. "Mr. Johnson, how did you obtain all of this?" Marcus finally sits. "I prepared," he replies. "I knew how this game ends." The room stills. No one speaks. Then, from the back of the room, another man steps forward. "Not on the invite list. Not introduced. I'm Mark Voss," he says, "head of internal reform, called in from corporate oversight." He turns to Catherine. "I've reviewed your internal communications, including deleted drafts and message logs. What I found matches exactly what Mr. Johnson just laid out." Catherine's face flushes, but she remains frozen. No smirk, no charm, just fear. Mark's voice hardens. "You built a system on silence." He just burned it down with documentation. Still standing beside his seat, Marcus reaches into his case once more, pulling out a small black folder. "One last thing," he says. "This is a list of other employees, past and present, who were affected the same way. I've anonymized them unless they choose to come forward, but let it be known, they are no longer alone." A ripple moves through the room. Small nods, tightened jaws. Victor looks across the table, voice lower now, but resolute. "Thank you, Mr. Johnson. You've done more than protect yourself. You've given us no choice but to act." The silence that follows is not awkward. It is seismic, and Marcus, for the first time in a long while, feels something bloom in his chest. Not revenge. Power. They thought he was just another employee. Turns out he was the audit. The doors to the secondary hearing room close with a soft, deliberate thud. This time there are no assistants, no observers, just the key players. The room feels colder, smaller, more surgical. A long polished table stretches between 2 sides of corporate tension. On one end sits Catherine, cheeks tight, suit rumpled, her lawyer whispering something she's clearly ignoring. Across from her is Marcus, back straight, presence calm but utterly unshakable. There's no tremble in his hands now, no hesitation in his eyes. He belongs here. Victor Ellis begins without formalities. His voice is clipped, exact. Miss Catherine, we'll begin with your remarks on March 17th. You stated to your assistant that Mr. Johnson was becoming too visible, and visibility leads to power. Is that correct? Catherine frowns. That was a private conversation. You were in the HR lounge, he corrects. Recorded by internal camera and corroborated by 2 witnesses. Would you like us to play the clip? She hesitates. That won't be necessary. Marcus watches, unmoved. Victor continues. 2 days later, you transferred Mr. Johnson from daytime to overnight shifts with no prior performance concern. That same week, 3 guests filed compliments in his name. 2 were directed to other agents. Can you explain the reasoning behind the shift change? She exhales sharply. Rotational restructuring. He wasn't the only one. He was the only one demoted with increased workload and fewer guest-facing interactions. We verified. Catherine's voice rises slightly. He was intimidating younger staff. He acted like he ran the place. Marcus finally speaks. I trained half of those younger staff members. I covered for them when they were sick. I stayed late when you left early. I never undermined anyone. I worked hard. You were threatened because the guests respected me more than they feared you. She turns, jaw tightening. You think you're righteous? You think you're a hero? I think I'm done explaining myself to people who never listened. Victor lifts another document. In this memo, you wrote, he needs to be broken before he builds a case. Was that your handwriting? Catherine goes silent. Her lawyer looks away. Marcus stands, smoothing the crease in his jacket. I never wanted revenge. I wanted recognition, fairness, safety. But when that failed, I made sure I wasn't the only one left telling the story. Victor's voice drops, but carries weight. Ms. Catherine, effective immediately, your employment with Milford Grand is terminated. You are hereby suspended pending legal review of all related conduct. Security is waiting outside. The room is frozen. A career ends in the space between 2 sentences. Marcus walks toward the door, pausing only once. He turns back, not with fury, but with truth. You silenced people for a living. I made sure our silence had a record. She held the title. He held the truth. And the truth never needed permission. By the next morning, the walls of Milford Grand no longer echo with authority. They vibrate with uncertainty, with footsteps of people unsure whether to whisper or walk freely for the first time. Catherine's office is sealed shut with a digital lockout code, her nameplate removed without ceremony. A small printed sign taped outside the glass reads, Under audit, authorized access only. The irony of such a clean label masks the mess that brought them here. Inside the building, whispers have evolved into full-throated conversations. In hallways and storage rooms, in staff kitchens and across elevator rides, people who once kept their heads down now speak with a strange, buzzing urgency. Some are cautious. Some are furious. All are awake. Marcus's name isn't spoken often, but it doesn't need to be. It's in the space between each sentence. It's the pause before every staffer says something they used to be afraid to say. The ripple he sent out has become a wave. By 11:30 a.m., the press picks it up. The headline on Hospitality Chronicle Weekly reads, Milford Grand faces accusations of racial targeting and retaliation. Whistleblower files trigger internal collapse. The article is surgical in its detail. Screenshots, transcripts, verified sources, leaked correspondence. It's the kind of story that doesn't just tarnish reputations, it alters careers. A single quote from a former employee anchors the narrative. They taught us to smile at guests and keep our heads down when managers smiled at us like wolves. The article spreads fast. Within an hour, it's trending on Twitter. By afternoon, it makes national news. Cable anchors use the words systemic targeting, toxic corporate culture, and undeniable evidence. The most chilling line, he needs to be broken before he builds a case. Gets replayed again and again, spoken in disgust, clipped for TikToks, analyzed in HR reform threads. That one sentence becomes the company's defining legacy. Then come the guests. Cancellations flood in. Long-term bookings dissolve. At least 2 major conferences pull out of their multi-million-dollar venue deals within the first 48 hours. One client, an international business summit, issues a public statement: "We cannot align with a brand that fails to protect those who uphold its values." Hotel stock drops 6 points before the week is over. Former employees step forward in unison. Some anonymously, some bravely with faces visible and names declared. The pattern is undeniable. Complaints that went unfiled. Schedules rearranged without cause. Demotions labeled restructuring. Warnings handed out for poor energy and visual inconsistencies. These aren't isolated cases, they're architecture. And now the walls are exposed. The board of directors meets in emergency session. They wear the same expressions: exhaustion, embarrassment, panic beneath power. But now they speak in a new tone: survival. They know damage control isn't enough. What's needed is excavation. They vote to initiate a formal investigation, but the internal one is no longer sufficient. They hire a third-party corporate reform agency to conduct a sweeping diversity and equity audit across every branch of the Milford brand. Harder they try, the harder they find. They call it accountability, but no one misses the subtext: desperation. A public apology is issued the next day, read by the COO, but notably not the CO. "We regret the breakdown in oversight," it begins. It ends with, "We are committed to building a more just workplace." But the words feel hollow. Too little, too late. A comment under the company's post reads, "How do you apologize for 10 years of silence in one sentence?" Meanwhile, Marcus receives dozens of messages from strangers, from co-workers past and present, from hotel guests, from people who had never met him but feel like they know him now. One message stands out. It comes from a man in a different city, a different hotel chain. He writes, "I saw what you did. I used to think I had to take it, but now I'm filing too. You gave us language for something we were taught to ignore." The momentum becomes movement. And then, on the 4th day, a quiet call comes through. Not from Milford, but from a competing luxury hotel group. The voice on the line belongs to their president of operations. "We've been watching carefully," she says, "and we don't want to make you an offer. We want to give you authority. We want you to lead something bigger than one front desk, a division, a reform initiative. Build it your way." Marcus listens in silence, one hand resting on the windowsill of his hotel room. Outside, traffic hums, ordinary and unchanged. But inside him, the ground has shifted. His voice was once silenced. Now, it has restructured a corporation. He doesn't smile in triumph. He breathes in deeply, evenly. It's not revenge that grounds him. It's justice. The building still stands, but its foundation now answers to him. 2 weeks later, under soft fluorescent lights, in a state administrative building, the hearing begins. It's no longer just a company issue. It's now a legal one. The Equal Employment Opportunity Commission has opened a formal inquiry into Milford Grand and its executive management. The room is sterile but charged. Not angry, determined. Marcus sits at the center table, not in isolation, but flanked by his legal counsel on one side and on the other by 2 former staff members who insisted on testifying publicly. They weren't required. They volunteered. Their presence alone says more than any speech ever could. The judge overseeing the hearing reads slowly from a prepared summary. This matter includes allegations of unlawful termination, racial and gender-based bias in promotional practices, falsification of internal records, and a pattern of retaliatory behavior against whistleblowers and staff deemed incompatible with brand optics. The words are clinical, but they land like hammers. At the back of the room, media quietly scribble. Catherine sits across the aisle, expression unreadable. She wears the same style suit, but it no longer fits the same. Her hands stay folded tightly, as if by doing so she can keep everything from slipping through her fingers. Marcus doesn't gloat. He gives his testimony clearly, plainly. He reads directly from timelines and transcripts. He does not editorialize. He does not embellish. He doesn't need to. When asked what he hopes will come from the proceedings, he says this: "I want a precedent, not just a payout, not just a quiet transfer of power. I want people to stop being afraid that speaking up will cost them everything." Gasps are heard when another staffer takes the stand, a former bar supervisor who had once been written up for nonverbal defiance. He recounts a night where Catherine instructed him not to seat certain guests in view of shareholders. "I kept my mouth shut then," he says, "but I'm not quiet now." One by one, witnesses come forward. Their accents differ. Their skin tones vary, but their stories rhyme. Patterns, punishments, pressure to be invisible while being expected to deliver excellence. The room transforms into a mirror, showing the institution exactly what it has become. By the time the defense tries to spin, it's clear there's nothing left to salvage. Catherine attempts to reframe her comments as stress management missteps. Her lawyer calls her firm, not unfair, but it doesn't land. The panel sees through it. The truth no longer requires polish. It has enough weight to stand on its own. And when the final question is asked, "Is there anything you regret?" Catherine's voice cracks for the first time. She says nothing. She spent years demanding silence, and now, silence is all she has. 6 months later, the hospitality industry doesn't look the same. What started with a single folder of receipts has grown into a nationwide initiative. Milford Grand, once silent and polished in its cruelty, now headlines reform roundtables, not by choice, but by consequence. The company's board, under mounting pressure from shareholders and legal advisors, implements sweeping changes: bias auditing systems, third-party grievance investigators, anonymous staff reporting structures, and mandatory racial equity training for all senior management, not the performative kind. The kind that stings. But the change doesn't stop there. Inspired by the fallout, a coalition of workers across competing hotel brands begins to mobilize. They call themselves the Guest-Facing Frontline, a name Marcus never asked to be attached to, but one they give him anyway. Former concierges, desk agents, housekeeping leads, and security personnel begin holding monthly webinars to share their stories. Their motto: "If you see something, log everything." A consulting firm reaches out to Marcus with a proposal to turn his documentation method into a replicable training system. He accepts, but only under one condition: he controls the content, and no one edits his voice. His first internal session, titled "What Silence Looks Like in a Spreadsheet," becomes the most watched corporate video in their firm's history. Even international chains request licensing rights. One hotel group invites him to keynote their executive retreat in Phoenix. He declines. Instead, he offers them something else: a conversation with their junior staff, one-on-one, no cameras, no suits, no PR rep in the corner. They accept. He arrives in a plain shirt, sits in a folding chair, and listens more than he speaks. One of the young men whispers to him afterward, "I thought being quiet was the only way to keep this job." Marcus squeezes his hand. Quiet helps no one. Truth might cost you, but silence will bury you. Meanwhile, policy reform organizations begin referencing the Milford Standard, a term coined by a journalist to mark the industry-wide shift triggered by Marcus's case. Entire hotel networks update their codes of conduct. Hiring practices evolve. Language in HR handbooks is rewritten. The ripple becomes a redesign. But for Marcus, the most meaningful moment comes not from headlines, but from a single letter sent to his apartment. Typed, no return address. Just one sentence: You made me believe I wasn't crazy for remembering how wrong they were. He reads it once, then again, and keeps it inside his coat pocket. The system didn't change overnight, but it started changing because someone stayed long enough to hold up a mirror. The building was never the enemy. It was the silence between its walls. Marcus walks through the lobby of a different hotel now, not as an employee, not even as a guest, but as a quiet observer. He's here on invitation, consulting for a new hospitality program focused on ethical leadership. The name tag they offer him says, Advisor. He doesn't wear it. Titles never meant much to him. His presence is enough. The staff smiles at him differently here. Not with forced politeness, but with something warmer, familiar. He sees himself in the young man checking in a family of 5, in the security guard nodding respectfully as she passes him by. They don't know everything he's done, but they know who he is. You can always feel the difference when dignity walks into a room. He steps outside into the sunlight, the world quiet and wide, and for the first time in years, his body isn't tight with anticipation. No cameras, no meetings, just wind brushing across his jawline and breath that comes without weight. His story is no longer trapped inside him. He gave it away, and in doing so, he freed more than himself. They took his job, they tried to take his name, but they couldn't take his voice. They couldn't erase the facts he wrote down or the silence he turned into testimony. Marcus didn't shout. He didn't explode. He didn't burn the building down. He proved it couldn't stand without him. When they shut the door in his face, he didn't pound on it. He built a new one. And when others saw that door, they followed. Not everyone will get justice the way he did. Some systems won't fold so easily. But someone, somewhere, is writing things down right now. Someone's pressing record. Someone's reading their contract more carefully. Someone's preparing, like he once did. Have you ever been dismissed, overlooked, or punished for simply being who you are? Have you ever stayed quiet to survive when you knew the truth deserved to be spoken? Have you ever watched someone else take credit for the peace you created? His story is not about revenge. It's about evidence. It's not about tearing things down. It's about making space for things that should have always had room to exist. So the next time they try to rewrite your story, remember this. You don't need to raise your voice to change the room. You just need to speak with clarity. The truth doesn't shout. It endures. What will you do with yours?